You don't find rain falling wet these days. Water is a scarce resource. When rain falling, fill up your barrel or tank to use. Carnival lovers, save water.
Save water. Save water.
Living on an island, you'd think we have an abundance of water. But over the last 10 years, we've gotten less rainfall due to climate change. Do everything you can to conserve water. Carnival lovers, save water.
Save water. Save water.
For climate change, what is Grenada going to experience? Going to experience water shortage. It's going to experience, particularly after storms, hurricanes, the water system is going to break down, and you will need water in between. Rainwater harvesting could help. So rainwater harvesting is not only about getting water for drinking or for use. It is also about minimizing flooding and flood control.
The presentation on rainwater harvesting, it is in two parts, and the second part of the presentation is going to be done by Mr. Alan Gilbert again. And in case you don't quite remember who he is, he's standing right next to me. He's the Senior Technical Advisor at GIZ. And so he is going to continue with the presentation. He's just keying things up. So again, pay attention and learn.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to, at this time, consider the regulations. We're going to be doing it in PowerPoint format, so it's not too boring on a Word document. So I trust that we're going to be going through all of it. I want to request of you to have something to take notes, maybe if you can use your phone or so. And when we get to various points that you're not certain of, or you need questions, then you can note the clause number, or you can take notes, and you can ask it during the Q&A time. We're doing it in this format because we want to make sure we get through all of the important clauses of the regulations, as we cannot consider the entire thing. It's about 20 pages long, so we're giving you the condensed version, and any technocrats or anybody who would like to have a copy when we move into our next phase of review, you can feel free to send your comments to us electronically. So we're going to just review the process that the regulation is going through. And a draft was done, and then we had our first, which was a technical consultation. We met with engineers, architects, and draftspersons to look at the technical issues of the rainwater harvesting regulations. We had a second part to that where we met with persons just to consider the quality aspect. So that was in two parts. Then we went to Carriacou, because Carriacou has an interesting situation there. As we've heard, only 2%, was it? 7% for now, and growing. But Carriacou has been doing rainwater harvesting for ages. And they are successful at doing it. So we learned a lot from them, and we updated the draft. And then we, back in Grenada, doing this general consultation. After that, we would update the draft again from what we learned tonight. And then we're going to convert it into a legal document. So in the process of hiring an expert, a legal expert, who could do that conversion for us. We are then going to publish it online. So during that period, you still have the opportunity to provide your comments, and that will then be for the legal draft, the draft that is now done so that it can go to cabinet. We're going to finalize the regulation after that and send it to cabinet and hopefully be gazetted thereafter. So that's a flow chart of how this regulation is going. We want to talk about what we're going to be doing tonight and what also we're not going to be doing. So first of all, we're going to be sensitizing the public on what is coming. We're letting you know what is coming. We're going to discuss the major technical and practical issues of the regulation. So that is going to be relative to the sizing, location, and all of that. Okay? And who you send your drawings to, your plans to, who can do your drawings, all of those technical, practical issues. We're also going to be getting your views during the Q&A. We're going to be discussing so that we can get your views on the social and financial implications. Okay? There may be other things not here, but implicit. What we're not going to be doing, we're not going to be looking for minor grammar and semantics, meaning issues to do with language, as the legal expert is going to be dealing with that, okay? So if you see a full stop missing, leave that out. We'll deal with that. The legal expert is going to help us there. We're not looking for minor legal inaccuracies. Now, I say minor, there may be a major legal issue or a legal ramification, and you want to bring that to us so we could understand that. But if it's a legal term, that the legal expert is going to see that and fix that up, okay? And we're not going to be making this political. We're not going to be dealing with politics. We might be discussing how the government can support or how what support is needed from government, but not politics. And I'm not going to, don't ask me for a definition of politics. So, the regulations. We have about 5 main chapters, and the first is preamble and interpretations. I'm not going to be doing anything here, but just showing you some of the headings that we have. So there's a glossary and a definition. There are other definitions. And then there's a unit conversion table in there as well, because there are lots of tables with conversion. There's the various uses of rainwater, and somebody answered very well with regards to that. Chapter 2 deals with composition of our rainwater harvesting system, and I'm just going to overview this as well. So there are 4 main components. The catchment area, which involves the roof, pavements, open tanks, or similar structures. There's a conveyance mechanism, which refers to what carries the water into the tank, guttering, gullies, and channel pipes, including a very important first flush system, or also called first flush diverter. And then there is a storage tank or cistern, and we heard that the most common one is what? Plastic. Concrete is the next in line, and there are also surface ponds and other similar structures. And finally, there's the delivery or the distribution system that speaks of the pumps that pump the water through the house, or pipes, taps, and hose. And so now we get into more of serious issues, design, planning, and approval requirements. And obviously, we have 2 persons from planning here, in the person of Ms. Janice Leslie and Mr. Houston Elcock, who is a technical officer in the Planning and Development Authority. So he's maybe able to answer questions relating to planning and design and approval and so on later down. Okay? So let's see if we can get through these. Obviously, you can sense I'm trying to do some numbers here in second gear, and probably might pick it up a little bit. So under chapter 3 in the design, we have all new buildings for domestic, commercial, industrial, or governmental use shall include in the design submission for the physical planning authority, Okay, that's supposed to be Planning and Development Authority. An appropriately sized rainwater harvesting system in keeping with table 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4, which you will see later on. Okay? As I go, I just want to point out, if you just have a point of clarity that you need as I go, feel free to stick your hand up and maybe the head table can help me point out that so that I can give the clarity, right? So 3.1.2, all inhabited buildings and use facilities having a footprint area greater than 23 square meters or 250 square feet. Anybody could square root that? That's what? Or that's like 25, it's like 25 by 10, but we want to get something more close. So these buildings having a square footage greater than 250 square feet are required to install rainwater harvesting systems in keeping with the same tables within 5 years from the date of enactment of this regulation. I hope that's clear. We continue. In cases where a permanent structure must be constructed to facilitate the rainwater harvesting system, appropriate structural drawings shall be prepared and submitted by an architect, engineer, or draftsperson to the PDA for approval. In the event where a prevailing circumstance prevent a new or existing facility from having a rainwater harvesting system, a special request for exemption must be made in writing by the owner to the PDA, carefully describing the circumstances. The PDA will review the application for exemption and only approve the request in writing if it is satisfied that the request is reasonable. So I know everybody interested to know what are these prevailing circumstances, and here they are. One, little or no suitable space for installation of a rainwater harvesting system. That's going to be predominantly in the town areas or so. The installation of a rainwater harvesting system will pose a significant risk to the safety of individuals or nearby property, or in the cases of extreme poverty of the inhabitants. And I move on. Drawings submitted for approval pursuant to clause 3.1.1, 3.1.2, 3.1.3, the previous ones we just read, shall provide sufficient details for the construction and or installation of the appropriate rainwater system and should include all 4 components referred to in section 2.1. Yeah, for clarity, yes? Yeah. So back to the slide before. I think everybody can hear me. Mike. Okay. This one, this slide? Yeah, the one that about the suitable space. So clarity or query? Okay, all right. Fair enough.
Right, so the question that I have on the suitable space, little or no suitable space for installation, who determines what little or suitable space is? So for example, if I'm in the town as you're suggesting, and there is space for a 100-gallon tank, and I want a 1,000-gallon tank, which can't fit, would I be obligated to put a 100-gallon tank?
Okay, so very, very good question, but one meant for the next section. So I'll ask you to stick a pin on it, maybe note it, and maybe can have my colleagues also recording it so that we could come back to it, because we don't want to miss that question, okay? So I know if we start, because we've been there before, so. All right, so I think I am here. Let me just make sure I'm not missing right. So drawing submitted, okay? Shall have sufficient details. So after that, clause 3.1.6, the design and drawings for all new water tanks that will have a storage capacity greater than, let's just go to Imperial, 10,000 gallons, or its length, width, or diameter greater than 20 feet, or its height greater than 10 feet, shall be checked by a licensed structural engineer, approved as structurally sound, and bear the stamp, seal, and signature of that structural engineer. Is that clear? Okay. (3.1.7) All drawings submitted to the PDA shall be subject to the fees, approval times, and processing as stipulated by the Planning and Development Act or Building Regulations of Grenada. And there's a waiver. Application fees will be waived for submissions whose building footprint area is less than 250 square feet and does not exceed 1 story high. Okay? I believe that's also clear. All tanks or cisterns which shall have a storage capacity greater than 50,000 gallons shall be designed by a certified civil, structural, or water engineer, or a combination of the above. Moving right along. 3.1.10. An environmental and social impact assessment, ESIA, shall be attached to the application documents to be submitted to the PDA for any tank or cistern that will have a storage capacity greater than 200,000 gallons. The PDA reserves the right to request an ESIA for any proposed rainwater harvesting system where it so deems necessary due to high risk or uncertainty. That's clear? Okay, moving right along. All right, so that's it for design and approval requirements. Now we go to storage capacity requirements. And we're looking at domestic storage. So 4.1, domestic rainwater storage requirement will differ between mainland Grenada and Carriacou and PT Martinique because of a few factors. One, difference in rainfall patterns, availability of potable water supply. And this is clear reasons. And we went to Carriacou with the same numbers for Grenada, and the people who came out clearly indicated to us that the numbers were too small. So they increased these. We increased it based on the consultation done at Carriacou. So we'll see those later. But for Grenada, the domestic rainwater storage is based on the footprint area of the building with the minimum storage capacity shown in tables 4.1 and 4.2. For calculating average storage on the mainland Grenada, a factor of 75 gallons per square foot can be applied. This is just a general rule of thumb for persons who are designing. They can use this to come up with the minimum. So we have, it's reasonably visible. So we have the minimum storage table before us. So for a building that's less than 250 square feet, and we will just deal with the imperial gallons, we have 3 units of measurement here. Liters, imperial gallons, and US gallons. It's 200, they will be required to have 200 gallons. And so on and so forth. So between 251 to 800 square feet, 400 gallons. 800 to 1,200 square feet, 600 gallons. From there up to 1,800 square feet, 900 gallons. And 1,801 to 2,400, 1,200 gallons. It goes on with a few more sizes, 2,100 up to 4,000 gallons. I'm sure you can see the numbers instead of me just repeating them. I'll leave a few seconds for you just to look at it and we proceed. All right, so for Carriacou, I just go to the bottom in that instead of 0.75 gallons it's 5 gallons per square foot. Okay, and the tables are as follows. So this is 4.3. So for the same 250 square foot house that was 200 gallons in Grenada, in Carriacou, the requirement is 1,000 gallons. And goes all the way up to, for between 1801 to 24 is 12,000 gallons. And for greater than 4,000, 25,000 gallons. And we're told many houses already in Carriacou are much more than 25,000 gallon tanks. One person at the consultation had way more than 25,000 gallons already for his home. All right, so under the ICI sector, there's a formula for coming up with the minimum storage. It's roof area, RA times the storage factor, and the storage factor we'll find in some tables. So what I just jump in here to the formula for accommodation facilities is the number of rooms. So sigma there for the engineers is sum of all the rooms. You add up all the rooms times the storage factor, which again we'll see in the tables. Okay, so this, and I hope you can see because a lot of numbers there. So let's just take one or two examples. Commercial, medium, and large. If your building, this is the criteria, if your building is greater than 1,000 square feet, but less than 5,000, and or 10, but not greater than 50 users per day, then you will multiply 2 gallons per square foot to the square footage of the building. So if you have a 2,000, well, then a 2,000 square foot building will multiply by 2, and your minimum will be 4,000 gallons. But then there is a minimum, which is 2,000. So for any commercial entity that is between 1,000 to 5,000 square feet, they cannot have less than 2,000 gallons, and so on and so forth. Okay? Is that clear? Is that understandable? Okay, very well. So moving right along. And this one is similar for Carriacou. I'll take the same one, medium to large. It will be 5, instead of 2 gallons per square foot, it will be 5 gallons per square foot times 2, that will be 10,000 gallons, and 10,000 is the minimum for Carriacou. That's for this category. And obviously we have for large industrial at two scales. Then we have hotels, guest houses, inns, and also have institutional schools and churches. In Carriacou, they would require 6 gallons per square foot. Okay? Also for agricultural facilities that have buildings, roofs, or catchment-like surfaces, they are encouraged to install a rainwater system with a storage tank that can contain 250 liters per square meter of the roof space, or that's 5 gallons per square foot. Specially designed and maintained surfaces, ponds or dams, are also encouraged with the assistance of a design professional. And this one, you notice the language is a little different, and you will see it says encouraged. Obviously, a farmer wants to make sure his crops are fed with water. He putting in a system will be beneficial to him. So if he doesn't, obviously he would lose his crops. So that's his incentive right there. Okay, and now we move to the final section, which is the rainwater quality guidelines and requirements. Again, a lot of this has been clipped out, but I gave the main points that I believe will affect you. So we're dealing with catchment, and let me just read this. Rainwater may be used for drinking purposes. Somebody had that question earlier. It may be used for drinking purposes if it is collected using regularly clean surfaces. Let me just pause here just to indicate that in Carriacou, persons drink water straight from the roof into a tank. And, well, they're surviving. So it's doable. Now, I have rainwater systems at home. I don't drink from it, though. I wouldn't take the chance. But it's doable. And obviously, there are some we learned that there are some traditional ways of treating by using small fish. Anybody remember the name of the small fish? Millions. That's it. Millions. We were told that in Carriacou. They put these fishes in it and all right, and there are other means of purification that they use. We heard that before they will set up a tank, they will wash it with sugar water. I did promise to research the science behind that, but did not get the time to do so, so I need to put that on my agenda. But yes, rainwater can be consumed, and rainwater, I was asked that by a good friend recently, who told me that their partner is putting a bucket outside, just catching the rain and just drinking it like that. And it's asking me if that is safe. I said it's absolutely safe to do, especially if it's in a clean vessel, a clean utensil. However, this is the regulation now. Rainwater may be used for drinking purposes if it is collected using regularly clean surfaces, which are not used for vehicular activity and which are not in close proximity, that's further than a half a kilometer or a third of a mile, to industrial exhaust systems. The catchment may be constructed from materials deemed safe for drinking water, such as Portland cement concrete, galvanized and galvalume with non-toxic baked or enamel finish, clay tiles, slate, non-treated timber, plastic, PVC, PE, which is polyethylene, along with other non-toxic materials deemed safe by a trained professional in the related field. That is clear, right? Okay. Continue on with inappropriate catchments. Certain surfaces are considered inappropriate for rainwater harvesting for drinking purposes due to the potential introduction of contaminants. Using the following surfaces can compromise the quality of harvested water: asphalt or tarmac surfaces, treated wooden surfaces, asbestos coverings, metal sheeting covered with lead-based coatings and other toxic coatings, corroded or rusty surfaces, and surfaces with chemical treatments. All right, so catchment shall be maintained in accordance with specifications provided in Table 5.2, and we are going to see Table 5.2 in a few slides. So we have, under the guidelines, we talk about removal of organic matter. There's primary treatment, which is, all of these are defined better, and there are more examples, but this is just a diagram of a first flush system, very important one which we're advocating for, to remove the debris and feces from small animals that are left on your roof. The first water is going to wash that off, and it will go down into the bottom of that chamber, this chamber here, and push this ball up and seal the joint here, seal the connection here, and then the rest of water will then move to the tank. After your rainfall, you bleed this, drain it. Some have automatic systems. It's bled here through this valve here, and you start the process over again. All right. And then there is filtration, using small slow sand filters that you can create yourself. We have these little diagrams, and obviously you can research those, find them online. DIY, do it yourself. DIY, do it yourself projects. So this is very easy to do. Persons can do those, as well as there are much larger systems, medium to large slow sand biofilters, which these are used by NAWASA, and happy to say this is a design I did for NAWASA years ago while I was there. All right, treatment against microbial and pathogens. There are many ways rainwater can be disinfected and or treated against harmful bacteria and pathogens, including boiling, distillation, iodization, and chlorination. The following subsections will highlight and recommend 3 key treatment methods, and those will be boiling, chlorination, ultraviolet water treatment. Now, I did not go to the specifics of those because most of those came from well-established entities such as the World Health Organization, PAHO, and other notable entities, and the sciences are well tested and proven. So no need to bring them here for discussion. We want to give you the science in this case. We also considered prevention of chemical and toxic contamination from well-known sources, and then there's also a section on labeling. Labeling is important so that there's Todd speak about the mixing of water, which is discouraged. So that speaks to that. Design requirements for treatment facilities or treatment systems. Any rainwater treatment system, supposed to be rainwater, to be used for drinking purposes shall be designed by a certified civil, environmental, mechanical, or water engineer, or a combination of the above, or by any individual or group so trained and certified to design such systems. The design shall be presented to the PDA for approval along with the other components of the rainwater harvesting system. Is this clear? Mm-hmm. Maintenance of the system. The following table, remember table 5.4, which we spoke about a few slides above, provides some general guidelines for maintenance procedures with the recommended frequency. I'll just show it. It's a bit small. It speaks of what you do with your roofs, to wash them off with water, and so on, and the frequency is monthly, and especially after long periods of dry weather. And all of these, again, are from well-known sources, scientifically proven, tested and proven. Again, we wouldn't stay on this. If we have a question on it, we could come back directly to this. So remember, the table is table 5.4. So quality surveying, sampling. Under quality surveying, there's 2 subsections, sampling and testing. And testing is going to be more important for us. So I'm going to show some of the clauses on the testing. It is required that all owners or managers of rainwater harvesting system to be used for commercial purposes, especially those to be used for drinking water and or personal hygiene, carry out inspection of its rainwater system and testing of the water quality every 6 months. The water quality shall include but not be limited to the parameters set out in table 5.3. So we're going to see those. Obviously, they're not limited to those, and this is something that may require revision to see if the parameters set out there are sufficient, the ones that are absolutely necessary to review. So we're going to look at that in a bit, I believe. Okay. So testing and inspection, we're looking at now quality, checking for quality. Testing and inspection organizations. So this is the heading there, because of some last minute trying to edit to get the size larger. The heading there came from another slide, so forgive that. This is supposed to be accredited agencies for testing, right? So testing and inspection organizations. Oh, there it is below there. So we're still under rainwater quality surveying, but the heading is there in black, so it just... Testing and inspection shall be carried out by organizations accredited to do so, like the Grenada Bureau of Standards, or any other body or organization so accredited by the PDA. So obviously the PDA has some responsibility here to approve these bodies, and that will be able. And there's a business opportunity here for persons to set up labs and so on and get accredited by the PDA so you can do testing, because obviously the GDBS will be overwhelmed with the amount of testing that they will need to do. So there are lots of business opportunities coming out of this. This is just one of them. Certification. Upon satisfactory inspection and testing, certificates of compliance shall be issued to entities in triplicates. One remains with the certifying organization, another is retained by the owner of the rainwater harvesting facility, and a copy provided to the PDA on or before the 6-month anniversary of testing or new installation. Certifications may be provided electronically. That's clear, right? Okay. Silence is consent. Failure to provide certification. If a commercial entity fails to provide the PDA with the necessary certification, take my time and read this one. The PDA shall formally request the owner of the facility to provide the required certification within 2 weeks of the communication being made. Further failure to do so may result in the PDA filing an injunction to have the facility shut down until the issue is resolved and a certificate is provided. Bear in mind, this is for commercial entities who are going to be using the water for drinking purposes and or hygiene purposes. So this is clear? Okay. All right, we get into the end very quickly. So the parameters and criteria for testing, again, WHO came up with some of these, and it's in tabular format. And some of them is one of the key bacteria, E. coli. I'll just show you and not deliberate too much and get into too much technical things. We have pH, aluminum, chlorine. Chlorine residual is important. pH, turbidity, nitrate. They have it in the table and say not relevant. I was saying if it's not relevant, why have it in the table? But WHO, not Alan Gilbert. All right, so that, I believe, brings us to the end of the important bits from the draft regulation. And I thank you for listening, and I know you have some questions. So I'll invite Ms. Leslie to come again and moderate the session. And I will join the team, and we will take answers. Some questions, obviously, will go to NAWASA, some to PDA, some to GDB, and we are here from representing G-Cruise.
Just to remind you, on the panel from my far right, that is Mr. Houston Elcock, and he is with the Planning and Development Authority. He's a senior development control officer, and he's going to be fielding most of the technical questions from you regarding the PDA. We also have Mr. Terrence Smith. I know I skipped Ms. Joseph, but we have Mr. Terrence Smith. He is not only is he a very, very senior and experienced engineer, but he's also the acting manager at NAWASA. And I'm sure he's going to be fielding quite a bit of questions. We also have Mr. Labari, whom we heard from, and of course, Ms. Joseph from GDB. You may still have some questions as it relates to financing. And like I say, some level of monitoring would be taking place for questions online that is relevant to the discussion and the panel which we have. We also have Mr. Gilbert, who is going to continue to field questions, and Mr. Bonaparte from GIZG Cruise. So the floor is open. You may begin with your questions.
Good evening. In Mr. Gilbert's presentation, he mentioned that the tank would have to be part of the drawings being submitted to PDA. Would there be a team ensuring that the tanks are being constructed? There may be times, sometimes you put it in so that your plans can get approved, but it's not done. You make changes whenever you feel like it. So would there be a team making sure that the tanks are actually being constructed?
Yeah, a pleasant good afternoon to everybody. Yes, there would be a team doing inspection on all construction that will be taking place in Grenada. So right now we have a team of inspectors. We would be going out even from now, going to do inspection and construction taking place in Grenada. Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Matnik.
A question for Mr. Gilbert. Does the regulations apply to government buildings?
Most definitely, the answer is yes, it does. I think it's mentioned somewhere in one of the clauses, governmental buildings, and they have to lead by example.
Good afternoon or good evening. I have a question, I think, which relates to the domestic table. It seems to be, if I was correct in looking at the table, based on roof size, so square footage. So again, buildings under like 250, maybe exempt. But what I was just thinking is, how are you taking into account the number of users in the building in terms of a domestic building? I mean, you have, for example, you might have an older person living in a relatively big house, but their children have left or whatever, it's only them. So is it fair for them to put like, a huge tank because of the size of the building when their water usage is really small? So how is that being taken into account?
Yeah. Very, very, very good question. Thank you for your question. This is something we have considered. Now, it's challenging to go to every household and find out the number, or to do regulations for every household based on the number of persons in the household. However, your question is very relevant. You may have a household with an old lady and all her children are away, but there may come a time when they come back, they may come to visit. And when they come to visit, they would still need water. So at that time, the tank might be oversized or the water might not be used during those times, right? But we still want them to make sure they have that storage. Additionally, rainwater harvesting is primarily based, and the efficiency of it is based on the size of the catchment. So that's the most important parameter, the size of the roof. So if you can collect that amount from the roof, we would like you to catch it, because you can also benefit other persons in your communities. And so we'll want those systems to be available for times like that. That is building resilience, community type resilience. So I hope that answers your question.
Hi, good evening. I have two questions. The first question is, that you mentioned buildings with tanks of over 10,000 gallons to be inspected. If the building already exists and it has a tank of 10,000 gallons, would that be inspected by a structural engineer? That's the first question. The second question, you also mentioned that farmers are encouraged, to do the rainwater harvesting. You have a situation where, particularly in dry seasons, farmers use river water, stream water a lot, and then the ecosystem of those streams are badly affected. You have life is basically disappearing, and some of these streams are disappearing. I would probably recommend much more than encouraging farmers to that. If you have a farm that is over an acre, I think it should be recommended that you have a pond installed in the farm, particularly when you do the short crop that is very popular in Grenada. I know that consumes a lot of water. So if there is a recommendation I would like to see there, is that instead of encouraging farmers, they should have ponds built in, and probably there should be some form of incentive to have lining for these ponds so that you don't have that adverse effect on the ecosystem. So one is the recommendation. The first one, the question I'd like to get answered, is the inspection of the tanks that's over 10,000.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you for those two very good questions. I will take the second one first because I remember most of it, and you might have to remind me of the first one. But the reason we're here is for questions like these, so that we could see if it is essential, important to consider not just encouraging farmers, but making it part of a regulation. So we would note that, and if we get the sense that there's a strong urge for us to move in that direction, then we move in that direction. The side that we considered is that it's a necessity for them to have water, but like you said, they're extracting water from the rivers, and that is having an adverse effect on the downstream end in terms of the ecosystem. So we would want to consider that carefully. We will talk with the technical team and see if that can be considered, and how to make it not too onerous on the farmers, but at least that they have some kind of storage. So we will consider that. Thank you for that. As regards your first question, it was about existing buildings, and you'll tell me if I'm correct. Existing buildings that have a 10,000 gallon tank, would a structural engineer need to go to inspect that tank? So the purpose, I would say we're not clear on that answer as yet, right? But the purpose for inspecting the new ones is to make sure it is structurally sound and cause no damage. By saying that they already constructed one that may be 10 years old, it probably could fail in a few years, but if it has survived 10 years, more than likely it's structurally sound already, and it's doing the job of collecting and storing water. So in the interim, we did not foresee that we would need to inspect those, but it may be something to consider. Yeah, thank you. You want anybody else?
Good night, everyone. What I'd like to add is that in respect of the gentleman's second question, one of the components of the J-Cruise project calls for the creation of a water resources management unit under the organizational guidance, if you may, of the PURC, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. When that entity is set up, and in time, it may take a few years before it's fully up and running, there will be, Grenada would then have the capacity for routine inspections of raw water extractions from our rivers. And in addition to that, extractors of fresh water from the rivers would have to be granted an extraction license or an extraction permit. So extraction from our rivers would be regulated in time. So that would be a means or a method of controlling, just wanton and excessive extraction from rivers. Your point about regulating rainwater harvesting for farmers is a bit more tricky for the policymakers than rainwater harvesting for domestic and commercial and industrial use. You would find that there are many examples that have been mentioned earlier in the presentation in the Caribbean where rainwater harvesting for domestic and commercial and industrial purposes is regulated. I don't think you'll find that many examples where rainwater harvesting for agriculture is regulated. So it is a bit more tricky. And we did have, when we had the earlier technical consultation, I remember there was quite a bit of discussion on that. So it's possible that the regulation could be, the process could go forward for mainly domestic, residential, commercial, and industrial, and then the regulation of rainwater harvesting for agriculture could perhaps be added, I would advise, perhaps at a later stage. I just thought I should make that point.
Thank you. We have a question online. It's been sitting here for a while, so I'm just going to, Amisha Prasad, she's on GIS. She said, just curious, would primitive rainwater harvesting, such as the bamboo drip irrigation, be subject by this legislation? Is it in the scope of consideration of harvesting?
Okay, for the person online, thank you for your question about bamboo drip irrigation. I think this has to do with irrigation method. really. And if the source is rainwater harvesting and it falls under agriculture, then Mr. Terence Forrester, Mr. Smith, sorry, oh, my apologies, Mr. Smith's answer would be would be effective there. But the bamboo drip irrigation is just a method of irrigation, and it depends on what source the water is coming from.
There is a continuation of that question I think is well within your scope. She also said, if I remember correctly, the IWRM Act, water ownership, is essentially assigned to the state. Does the state have the rights of access to domestically harvested water should the need arise? That's the second part.
Sir, I'm not sure you understand the question.
If public utilities have access to private systems underwater. So essentially, to answer the question, on our end, we do not have the rights to your rainwater harvesting, your rainwater generated from rainwater harvesting. However, in emergency times, and probably in cases of hurricanes or so forth, and there may be issues, damages related to our system. And even as a case that we had before, persons who have sources that could share with others are allowed to do so. We're not in control of that. And in some instances, major tanks could be used for communal feeding as well. But to answer the question directly, we do not have any control over your domestic rainwater that you generate.
Yeah, what I was going to add to the earlier part of the question is, again, in the earlier technical discussion, there was some debate on that. I don't think the intention of the rainwater harvesting regulations is to regulate every aspect of rainwater use to death. So small, individual household level, traditional methods of, the so-called rain barrels for, irrigating a little kitchen garden or your vegetable plot or whatever. I don't think the intention was to go that far. The intention was to regulate new construction and by extension existing construction, including government buildings, commercial and industrial entities. Not to bring it to a kind of, ridiculous level. Because let's be reasonable. The state and statutory bodies and so would never have the capacity to monitor and manage every single user of rainwater in Grenada. So the simple answer is no, it's not intended to go to that extent.
Thank you. I think this gentleman over here, he had his hand up for quite a while. Okay, no worries, go ahead.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Firstly, I want to applaud the initiative. I think it's a great initiative. I have myself examined the Carriacou rainwater harvesting systems for quite a bit, and I think it's a good idea for Grenada to become a kind of a predominant practice in Grenada. I had a couple of questions though, as it regards to the impact on natural habitat, ecosystem, and the water table. I was listening, I apologize for my tardiness, but I was listening online before getting here, and I was concerned still, despite the presentation so far, about where are we in terms of how did we properly assess, or what type of study or opportunity grow to ensure that we're not depleting or that we're managing properly. And when I say so, for example, Grenada is hilly. A certain level of rainwater we know would be collected at a higher amounts based on the geographical location and the rainforest and other contributing factors. would it be that we're approving more collection in those areas, and then what are the impacts in the down flow after that? And when I say so, not just ecosystem, but also, excuse me, so some businesses that may rely on that as well. And immediately my mind ran on the water tubing and some of the other uses. That's one. I also had a question on the code enforcement for the GDB. I think it's a great initiative, and 2% is I was driving along and went wow, and my passenger was wondering what I was screaming about. It's a great rate, and the 200,000, it's a great amount. My concern or query is, how are we monitoring compliance, especially since one of the last response we just had was we don't have access, unrestricted access on property to evaluate or examine. So how are we ensuring compliance? After we would have given a loan as the GDB unit, how are we ensuring compliance? Do we have a code compliance unit? Do we have a component of the loan where it says you must grant access for verification or validation for your water quality checks and all of that? So that's something I was also concerned about. Do we have like a written policy for adhering to the overall process? And then I also just wanted to know if we could have the slide available in this form, and then also in the form after it would have been drafted by a legal consultant, as stated before in my listening. Thank you.
Okay, well, seeing that I have the mic, I'll address the GDB part and then pass on to my colleagues here. In terms of compliance, it's part of our contract agreement with all our customers in terms of access to their properties for monitoring purposes during the implementation of any project. So we have officers and technical persons who would do periodic inspections to ensure that implementation is going according to plan and schedule and based on what was approved. So those systems are in place, and those are activities that are part of our business as usual.
Sorry, if before I think Mr. Gilbert would address the last part, but you raise an interesting concern that's often raised in the rainwater harvesting debate. If I heard you correct you, sir, you were asking, have we considered if water users are collecting rainwater, what would be the likely impact on the watershed, on the water table? Was that your question? On the watershed and so. Well, look at it this way. If a particular household is augmenting, we use the term water augmentation, is replacing his Nawasa supply, let us say to the amount of 20%, 1/5 of his, or the family's daily average daily water consumption, let us say is 100 gallons per day, for simplicity. If that family now is harvesting 20 gallons per day, or 1/5 of the 100, by directly collecting rainwater, ask yourself the question, well, it is augmenting a supply that otherwise would have been provided by the National Water and Sewage Authority, which itself collects rainwater primarily because well over 90% of Nawasa's supply is surface water, which is rainwater runoff. So it may seem to be a little counterintuitive, but in fact, if a household is augmenting 20% of its daily water requirements, it stands to reason that it's using 20% less of the rainwater that Nawasa otherwise collected and treated and transferred to that house. Having said that, rainwater harvesting is recognized in urban areas, well, not only in urban areas, but it would, for Grenada's purposes, its impact would be best felt in low-lying urban areas. rainwater harvesting is now well recognized as a flood mitigation measure. So that if you have an episode of extreme rainfall, yeah, and let us say you have 1 month's supply of rain falling in one night, for example, as has happened in many places, including in Caribbean islands, and you have all or most of your households collecting rainwater. Now, it could be calculated. We're not going to get into specifics, but it means that a not insignificant proportion of that rainfall that is falling to the earth, some of it is going to be getting into the soil, infiltrating into the soil. It later becomes what is called base flow. Some of it is going to be used by plants and trees in evapotranspiration. Some of it is going to be evaporated directly by when the sun comes up again. A large proportion of it is going to run off, causing erosion and siltation of Nawasa's dams and so on, and causing flooding in low-lying areas. If a significant proportion of that rainwater is collected and stored for a period of time, it would lead to less flooding and less damage. So I just wanted to point that out. So on the contrary, and also rainwater harvesting can also be used for aquifer recharge. There are methods of rainwater harvesting in which the rainwater is deliberately encouraged to flow back into the groundwater, into the recharging an aquifer. So on the contrary to what you may have been suggesting, as I say, it could be a little counterintuitive, all of the aspects of rainwater harvesting, right, are generally very positive for the environment and generally environmentally sound. I just wanted to make that point. Thanks. You could answer.
And then just to add to that, it is basically multiple small-scale detention ponds that you would see in the urban areas. So they are usually designed to capture the water in immediate aftermath of rainfall, while the catchment is contributing. So what it does, it detains some of that water, and it would reduce what we call the peak flow at the outlet, and it would minimize the effects of flooding as well.
And just on that same point, we mentioned in our presentation that in a worst case scenario, we'll be only using 2% of the annual rainfall, only 2%. So it's a clear indication that rainwater harvesting is a benefit rather than to our ecosystem than it is that it provides any threat. We will provide a draft for comments, especially to persons who want to provide technical input. We would provide that. We would just see one of our project desk assistants, they're dressed in blue. You can give them a card, and we will be happy to send the draft to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and after this gentleman, we're going to take the mic across the floor to this gentleman in the white shirt, okay?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Just to tie in the finance with the physical guidelines, what it might cost to construct a concrete tank of 25,000 gallons. Anybody try that, please?
I believe I had that exact measurement on the screen. 25,000 is about, again, it depends on the type of construction, but on average about $80,000 to $90,000.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
First question. If I decide in a new construction to not be connected at all to what we might refer to as the main supply or the grid or however you want to call it. So I build my tank, get my approval, so I have no need to use NAWASA's water. All right? I know in the past, even if you did so, you did have to pay something. That probably doesn't exist anymore, but I know that was the case in the past. So I can produce all my water with no use of NAWASA's water, and my only cost would be the construction of my tank. That's, I just want to clarify if that's the case.
So essentially, the meter that you get if you have a NAWASA connection, even if you use, if you have a meter on the site, you would have to pay a maintenance fee. But if you don't have a meter, you would not have to pay any maintenance fee to NAWASA if you're fully off the grid.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Second question. I know that the advantages of harvesting rainwater, but the other thing is incentive. The only incentive to someone to do the rainwater collection would be the legislation or the legal thing that you must do it. So, for example, if I use $500 worth of water a year, meaning my bill is $40 a month or whatever, all right? Why would I want to build a tank or harvest water, which will probably cost me a good bit more than that, even over a 5-year period? So let us say my building is 2,000 square feet. And based on that, the legislation might be that I am supposed to have a tank of a certain size. And the cost of that, the cost implication of that, it's cheaper for me to pay now as my $40 a month rather than going and build a tank for whether it is $5,000 or $10,000, etc. So the only incentive then to me would be that it will be illegal. And that, I think, is not practical, right? So I don't know. I'm not asking to increase the price of water, by the way, right? But it doesn't, there should be some incentive for me to do so. Not just that after a certain period, it would not be legal to have a home and not have storage tanks and harvesting water. The third question is kind of related. When is this expected to come in? Because I might have to either build a tank now before the regulations come in or not. So I don't know if you could tell us that.
All right, let me see if thank you for your questions. Let me see if I can answer. There are a number of benefits. I don't know if you were here when we dealt with the first presentation of the benefits of rainwater harvesting. We've heard about erosion control, we've heard about flood mitigation. There is also the aspect of available water in times when water is out from the potable suppliers. Okay, that's a benefit to you, so those you have not considered. If your bill is $40 and you start using rainwater harvest and using 50% as the data shows that you could reduce your bill by, then you have a 50% saving. That's another benefit. But you will recover your investment. The average payback period is about 5 years. In some cases, only with the concrete tank, for a commercial entity, it goes all the way up to 15 years. However, you will be having a tank that has a useful life of 100 years. You can use that same commercial system, a 5,000 gallon storage. You can do it for 5 times cheaper. The only thing is your useful life will be less, but you will recover your investment within about 5 years. So overall, you still will recover your investment that you spend. After that time, you will only have savings. There is only benefits. From that perspective of the cost, there are benefits.
Just to clarify one point that I made earlier, when I said for the pay for the meter, I'm not generally talking about paying for the maintenance for the meter itself, but it's a basic service charge that considers all the aspects of maintaining your service.
right?
Yeah, both some important food for thought you raised there. You mentioned about incentives. We haven't reached that stage as yet in Grenada, but let me just share with you and the audience and those online that there are different incentive schemes that governments have used in the region and in other countries. For example, if the government of Grenada were to zero rate for VAT the components of a rainwater harvesting system. So we're talking about the guttering, downpipe, first flush diverter, tanks, perhaps filters, and pumps. Those are generally so you have a collection system, a conveyance system, a storage system, and most households would need a pump to pressurize if they're to reuse it in their plumbing. If the government were to take a decision, as has been done in other places, to zero rate for VAT these components, it means that they would become a lot more affordable to a wider cross-section of the population. Let us not forget that our sisters and brothers in Carriacou and Petit Martinique have been collecting rainwater for generations, for hundreds of years, forever. Let us not forget that when the team went to Carriacou, what did we find? Now, I find those are really large, but you are saying that it's the people of Carriacou that say the tank sizes you have are not large enough. So it just becomes a way of life. So when you're building a new house, you might invest an additional $30,000 or $40,000 in ensuring that underneath your living room or your living room and dining room is a tank. It's built into the foundation. It's part of the structure of the house, right? So a lot of public education would have to be done. A lot of advocacy would have to be done, including for the policymakers, who are the ones that have to sit down in cabinet or go to parliament or whatever as the case may be, and make a decision. Can the government of Grenada, with its finances, afford to cut the VAT by 50% or even zero rate it? That is a political decision that will have to be made. But I think part of the job of those of us here, certainly I'm a water engineer, I work with the water utility, we have various water professionals and so forth. I think part of our job would be advocacy, and this is part of what we're doing here tonight, to get people to understand. This is not some new, novel rocket science that we're trying to promote for the population of Grenada. The people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique have been doing it for generations, right? Now, not every house in Carriacou, I'm sure, has a pump or can afford a pump. They use novel, the millions fish and so on. I personally, I have a rainwater harvesting system for my home, right? It works with a 1,000 gallon, and we're talking about plastic. The proper term is high-density polyethylene, the so-called black tanks. I have 1,000 gallons for my home because of the size of my family. I personally don't see myself putting any little fish to swim, to eat the mosquito larvae. But I take measures to ensure that mosquitoes can't get inside of my tank, right? So, as I say, it's important considerations and so on, but let us not forget also that if we do not, as a Grenadian society, if we do not do something different with respect to water management, the day will come when we will not have an adequate water supply, right? So the conditions about, is it worthwhile, is it beneficial, I have to spend X amount and so on. There will be serious problems in our society. And there's an interesting article, I'm sorry I should have walked with it, and perhaps we can ask the project to circulate it. It was remember I shared it with you, it's Dr. Adrian Cashman did an op-ed for a regional NGO called GWPC, Global Water Partnership Caribbean. You could find it online if you Google GWPC Caribbean op-eds. It was an op-ed, I think, that was done earlier this year or either January 24 or December 2023, that looked at some future scenarios, right, in the Caribbean. If rational and well thought out climate change adaptation measures were not taken for the water sector, including for Grenada, right? And it looked at one of the scenarios as, a kind of business as usual. What is it going to look like in another 15 years, the water supply, right? And I'm not going to go into it now, but it's important that people try to read it. It was a pretty scary scenario in which wealthier people were able to afford desalinated water, and the bulk of the population, poor people, would be struggling with, in our case, an Awassa that at that time could not adequately satisfy Grenada's water needs, and then we'd have a very, very inadequate water supply. So we really need to shake up ourselves and take climate change seriously and see what can each of us at our respective households do, right, to harness a resource. The rain falls, as they say, free, it's God water. It costs Nawasa a lot of money to collect, treat, harness, treat, convey, store, and get on to the customer through a meter. So that this is the rainwater harvesting is a tried and tested rainwater technology that has been used not only in developed countries, but not only in developing countries, but in developed countries as well. And we really, as I say, it's been practiced by Carriacou and Petit Martinique. It just has not really caught on and taken hold on mainland Grenada. And that is really where we need to go with this.
Thank you so much. We do have a number of questions from persons online. I'm going to try to go through them really, really quickly before we get back to the floor. Is there someone assigned to ensure that the rainwater systems installed meet the requirements? That would be the responsibility of the Planning and Development Authority, because every system has to meet certain criteria. Once the application is made, it's going to be reviewed to see if those criteria are met. There is going to be in the field inspections and all of that to ensure that it is built according to standards. I have another question here. The regulations affects not only new but existing houses. I am suggesting an extension of consultative processes.
Yes, we take that into consideration. I had that very thought, and we will find ways to extend, I believe.
Someone asked, can treated harvested rainwater be bottled and sold, or can it be used for other parts of the manufacturing process, example in baking bread in a bakery, once it meets quality parameters? My guess will be yes, because if it can be treated and drink, and you can drink it, why can't you bake with it or do any other thing with it? But you may want to confirm that.
Yes, yes, of course, yes. I've seen in a major hotel in St. Lucia, they're off the grid, collecting rainwater, treating it, and the quality is tested by a well-known agency, and it is much higher than potable water, and bottled and sold.
So I hope that answers your question. There is another one. Who determines what little or no suitable space is? And I believe our gentleman there asked that question earlier. It was answered. It wasn't answered as yet? Okay, who would like to, on the panel, would like to answer that question?
So the physical planning authority, the individual will be responsible to say, I don't have the space, and to the planning authority, the planning authority will go have a visit, and if that is the case, they will issue an exemption. So ultimately, that responsibility lies with the Planning and Development Authority.
Okay, while I'm at it, I'm just going to run through this question. Is there considerations for a tax credit system for rainwater harvesting systems being installed on structures existing prior to the legislation?
We intend to hold discussions with our various parliamentary representatives, MIT, the whole works, the whole team, to see if issues like that could come to the table where we can get reduction in taxes and duties, levies, and so on. So that's in the making, and those discussions will be held soon.
And the final one, for persons where tap water is not constantly available due to demand lower downstream, example, Grandins Valley, Frequente, Limes, and others who cannot afford to set up a rainwater harvesting system. Is there anything in place for such people? I am going to ask Ms. Joseph to respond to that one.
As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, we do have financing available, particularly geared towards those persons who you might consider in those communities. So if any one of you are interested in obtaining financing even now, you can reach out to the GDB and we would do an assessment of your needs in an attempt to facilitate.
And also to add to that on Nawasas, and those persons in the south, in the Limes areas, there's a component of under G-Cruise for a water tank on the area called Guankai, that's on top of the hill above the Limes and so forth, that would be used for Nawasa to better serve the customers in that area. That project is partnered with the UKC, where we'd upgrade our lines to ensure better hydraulics in the system.
Thank you very much. Back to the floor.
Yes, so I still have the mic. So the point on the regulations, what I wanted to just suggest is that if it can be stated clearer in terms of the space so that you avoid, we have a lot of smart lawyers around that could create, so if there can be something that can say particularly X square feet or you don't have certain space, etc., so that for the avoidance of doubt in terms of what is adequate or inadequate space for installing the tank. The other point that I have, and clearly my points would be for the planning authority and so on. So I would have done my designs, installed a rainwater harvesting facility in keeping with the regulation. Fast forward a year, I decide this thing's stagnant, it's not making sense for me. Let me use my tanks to do something else. You pass by, I don't have a tank, right? And I noticed that the presentation didn't make any specific allocations for residential homes. It speak about the commercial, and you need to have the paper, whatever you call it, from the agency, the testing agency and so on, but nothing of the sort for the residential home. So fast forward a year, you pass by, I don't have my tanks. I tell you, well, I had them. Yeah? What happens?
Well, I guess the regulation is still being put together, so I guess penalties would be implemented and for the appropriate time. Okay. If you have a water tank and you're supposed to keep it for the purpose which you designed it for, you may want to convert the water tank to our residence.
No, that's fine. So the point that I'm actually trying to get at, Gilbert, is that should be clearly stated in terms of what the fines and so would be, so that persons have a clear appreciation as to the compliance. Yeah?
Exactly, and I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is storage, but we don't talk a lot about use. It is not just to store water for emergency, but it is also that it becomes a regular part of your household use. So if that is happening, you're washing your car with it, you're bathing with it, you're gardening with it, you're doing all of that, the likelihood of people not using their tank becomes less. So we're also saying it's not just about storing water for emergencies, it's about making rainwater harvesting a regular part of your daily lives.
Yeah, thanks. I know that point, Mr. Cox, I think is very valid, that we consider, especially we didn't talk much about penalties and inspections and all of that. So that needs to be factored into the regulations and make sure we're absolutely clear and explicit about all of these issues. So we'll consider those. Go right ahead.
Yes. Good night. Taking into consideration that most roofs in Grenada are metal, has any inquiry been made into the lead content of the finishes?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. You have to excuse me.
Sure, of course.
My sinuses are. Okay, so taking into consideration that most roofs in Grenada are metal, has any inquiry been made into the lead content of the finishes?
Yeah, there's definitely an issue with existing roofs having lead content and other toxic components, especially in the paint and the coatings on those roofs. But a great number don't. However, what we advocate is that persons with these roofs only use it for the 50%, which is for other things other than drinking. So the water is good enough for all the uses we spoke about: washing your car, laundry, your gardening, and so on. So we wouldn't advise you to use it for drinking in those cases. And that's why I would just add, that's why we would now encourage new homeowners to ensure that your roof surfaces don't have any of those. And we will speak to suppliers also to ensure that they're importing materials for roofing that is safe for drinking water. Anybody else?
Yes, good night. I think in Mr. Gilbert's presentation, he did make reference to the challenges faced with mosquitoes in tanks, etc. I'm just wondering if you see any merit in specifically legislating the type of openings or coverings, covers for tanks, so as to mitigate against the ingress of vermins, whether there be mosquitoes, whether there be rats, whether there be snakes, because I can tell you that is, that can be a serious problem. And two, whether or not there is merit in regulating the frequency by which these tanks are cleaned. Because you can have a situation where persons can put up a tank and it just accumulates a lot of debris and silt at the bottom and they're not being cleaned. So would you see any merit in actually regulating that as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. There is merit in regulating that. Obviously, it will take some work in trying to find the best type, and person might have innovative ways. Like I use a old tie to make a seal around the tank. But obviously, we want to talk with suppliers about that as well. And in terms of the frequency of cleaning, it is mentioned in the document, as it is mentioned in the document, and we have the certificate for testing. When you test, they will inspect for cleanliness and all the sanitary parameters that is there in the regulations, and then you receive a certificate. So it will not just be it's done once and then after that it's not done. We believe the regulation will encompass that, but we will take that into consideration in terms of looking at how we seal tanks better. I just want to make this one more point. I have an open tank. It's the first of its kind on top of a bedroom, right? And when I was designing that, I was not yet working at GIZ. I was at Solid Waste, so I wasn't even thinking of water, but I just sat and just looked for a concept that I believe could work. It's an open tank sitting on a roof, and it has no mosquitoes. And one of the reasons is because it's well aerated, it has a lot of sunlight, right? And the wind is high at that elevation. It's about 30 odd feet in the air. And that tank serves all my 3 toilets in the house. So it's a good concept for persons to think about as an open tank, still no mosquitoes.
Thank you so much. It is 8 o'clock. but we are probably going to take 2 more questions, right? So
I just had one point to make on the last 2 questions. The inspection is predominantly done for the commercial systems where persons intend to use that water for other persons. Now, there would be a certain level of ownership that for the residential rainwater harvesting systems that the owner has to take. If you're going to use that water, you have to ensure that it's fit for use. Otherwise, you would have to use the poor quality water yourself. Or if you abandon your system, then you don't have the storage for whenever you need it. And as the other lady was speaking about the quality of the roof, another thing I want to reiterate from a quality standpoint is that the tanks, if you buy plastic tanks, which is popular, you have to ensure that they have the polypropylene lining inside of it. That's the white lining inside of the tank. That is for potable water use, not the black tanks that have the black lining inside.
that's interesting. Okay, so 2 more questions.
Okay, thank you very much. What consideration, I know we are talking about storage and savings. However, we are assuming that people are consistently using the water they catch on a monthly basis, whereas historically we have stored the water. So you can't be consuming the $40 worth of water every month where people will be storing the water because you're expecting people to use almost all of the water every month from rain. So I don't know if there's a flaw in the calculation, but it will be much more than the 4 years because we would still be connected to the mains, and it's only when we don't have use of water, people would then go to what is stored because we have hurricanes and other things to prepare for. No? Because I did the $40 times the amount. Well, okay, well, you'll respond to that just now. However, as a part of storage, I've been sitting there thinking about, I live in a 2-story house, and I'm trying to see how I can get rainwater upstairs, because if I'm to save that $40, it means that I have to now put a pump and spend that money, more money in electricity to get the water to service my house, because my tanks are currently on my roof. And I'm trying to think, since the inlet of my tank is above the roof surface, how do I get water into that tank on top there? And what do I have to put on the ground to collect the water first to pump it up into my tanks? Because there are certain considerations. It seems as though we are thinking about single-story homes, but there are homes that might be 3 stories. And so there are other things to be taken into account. And space as well, because I have absolutely no space to put the collection on the ground. That's why my tanks are on my roof already. And what do I now do with the water that I get from the water in those? So do I not collect any more of that water and just go to rain? Because I live in frequency and sometimes you don't see rain, you know. So what do I do? Because and I hardly use all the water in my tank. But I'm just saying that I don't want to, you know, give away something and be at a disadvantage, you know, in the long run.
Those are very valid considerations, and we at this table don't have all the answers to all of those questions. What I can say is yes, if you're collecting, if you have your tank on top of a 2 or 3 story dwelling, you say you have your tank on the roof. So how do you get water to it? If you're to collect rainwater, you must collect the rainwater obviously by gravity. It has to flow from the roof to a tank. If you have to use that water at a higher elevation, such as a 1st floor or a 2nd floor, you would have to pump it. Pumping has a cost. Electricity in Grenada is very expensive. But remember solar PV. We're living in an age where we can have, increasingly, the cost of photovoltaics has come down significantly. So you could look at the option of putting in a couple of PV cells on the roof right, to augment your electricity use from Grenlec. The concept of storing water only for use like after a hurricane, I don't think that would not be a wise use of rainwater and rainwater harvesting. One can look at what is called a blended system, in which you have your Nawasa supply, your Nawasa connection routed to that tank, yeah? And you augment the supply to that tank by rainwater harvesting. So for example, it may not rain for a week in the dry season, or maybe 2 weeks, right? You would then be drawing down on that supply from the tank or tanks, and as well as using your Nawasa supply. But in the rainy season, you could possibly turn off your Nawasa connection after the meter and just let your tank, I mean, if you get a good rainy season rain anywhere in Grenada, you know, a 1,000-gallon tank could be filled in an hour to an hour and a half, depending on if you know how much of a proportion of your roof that you're collecting water from. So, as I say, we don't have all the answers because there's a whole range of calculations and scenarios you could look at. But what is irrefutable is there are so many advantages to rainwater harvesting that renders rainwater harvesting as a viable climate change adaptation measure for Grenada. And I think that is the lesson that we're really trying to get out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more question?
Yeah, I was wondering, because the rainwater harvesting system would be a substantial investment, do you think we would have any insurers that would give coverage to the people who actually want to invest in that and does not want to go through a financial institution?
I heard the word substantial. Very good question. I heard the word substantial investment. We probably may have to battle on the semantics of the term substantial. If $2,900 or $2,500 might be a substantial investment for some. So I take that point, and it may not be for others. However, be that as it may, sorry, you are. Yeah, it's part of your larger structure. It increases the value of property as well. And so definitely there will be some cost to it, but I don't think an insurance company will be looking at it as a separate entity from your billing. And I know for a fact that insurance companies look at your external works, is called in some cases, some will say civil works, and they will put a value to that to give you insurance. I'm sure they will inspect. But obviously, we recommend, if you're using what we say plastic tanks, we're referring to HDPE tanks. If you're using the black tanks, you enclose them in what we call a curtain wall so that it's protected, so that it adds some resilience. But if you can, and you can build a concrete tank, those tanks are very strong and resilient against forces of nature, and they could last a very long time. You will see a payback period over a longer period, but obviously it will still have some benefit to you.
I just want to clarify this. For example, for new structures, when the plan comes into planning authority, it would have the tank as part of the structure. So in the future, when it's being evaluated in any type of way, it is a house with a tank, and that adds value. And I'm sure that would fall under my guess is that it will be insurable. Does that answer your question? All right. So guys, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We are out of time. So at this time, I am going to ask Ms. Janelle to come up here and just give a vote of thanks, and we'll make our way home.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leslie. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the G-Cruise Project and the Physical Development Authority, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for your active participation in today's consultation. here and also those online. We had between 60 to 90 persons online, so I want to say thank you to those persons online as well. This event marks a significant step towards fostering collaboration and understanding within our community. Your valuable insights and contributions have played a crucial role in enhancing the upcoming rainwater harvesting legislations. I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the Grenada Development Bank, represented by Ms. Natasha Joseph here, and the National Water and Sewage Authority, represented by Mr. Smith and Mr. Todd, for your insightful presentations. Through GDB's presentation, we learned about the EDA project, and we would also like to thank NOWASA for their support and clearly explaining the benefits for consumers in terms of getting involved in rainwater harvesting. We'd also like to thank our project manager, Mr. Brian Bonaparte, for informing and also reminding us of the essence of the G-Cruise project, Mr. Alan Gilbert for explaining the legislation, different aspects of the legislation, and we also want to thank PDA, who is represented today by Mr. Elcock and Ms. Lessie, for your insights as well. As we navigate the path towards sustainable rainwater harvesting, your engagement has illuminated critical aspects, including storage and quality requirements, social and financial implications, and traditional approaches. Your voices will echo in the corridors of decision-making, ensuring that the regulations are comprehensive and reflective of the community needs. In closing, let us carry forward the spirit of today's dialogue and continue to work together for a better Grenada. Thank you.
The ocean dances, the rivers flow, water is everywhere you go. But what does this precious resource mean to you? In honor of World Water Day, held on the 22nd of March annually, the G-Cruise project took its cameras to the streets to find out what does water mean to you.
For me, water is the foundation of everything. Water means a healthy community, thriving ecosystem, and a bright future for Grenada.
Water is life itself. It is vital for our family's health and well-being. We use it to grow healthy foods, cook nutritious meals, and stay clean.
As a marine biologist, every drop we save helps safeguard our oceans, which is essential for not just our marine life, but the future of our island.
Water fuels my energy on and off the field. That's why I use a reusable bottle, helping to conserve this vital resource.
The G-Cruise project aims to increase climate resilience in the water sector. Let us work hard to ensure we have a water-secure future in Grenada. What are you waiting for?